Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 10th of November 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And as always, a quick comment really on the weather. As somebody said today, it's colourful, which I think is pretty appropriate. So it's colourful, clearly global warming, clearly the climate is changing. What have we got? Wet and windy in Glasgow, pretty grey and rainy in Plymouth. Manchester is mild, however, so if you're in Manchester, well done.
So we're launching a new hashtag today.
Indeed.
A new hashtag if you're on Twitter, and it's going to be hashtag EU referendum PSYOP, and we are absolutely calling, we've been calling this for quite, something similar for quite a few months now, but really today's speech by David Cameron at Chatham House on Britain's future relationship with Europe sums that phrase has to be the one that sums it up. Now this follows on from a letter that he wrote to Donald Tusk, who of course is joint president of Europe, or one of the two presidents of Europe, in which he said, well, nothing really, Brian, but naturally in today's speech he was highlighting some of the problems that get people most angry with Europe: immigration and benefits. And he said, well, he used Facebook for this. Actually, he said in a Facebook post, I've set the four objectives at the heart of our EU renegotiation. We need action in all four areas. Objective 1, protecting the single market for Britain and others outside the Eurozone. What I mean by this is a set of binding principles that guarantee fairness between the Euro and non-Euro countries. Objective 2, write competitiveness into the DNA of the whole European Union, and this includes cutting the total burden on business. Objective 3, exempt Britain from an ever closer union. And this is really where the PSYOP comes in. Exempt Britain from an ever closer union and bolster national parliaments, not through warm words, but through legally binding and irreversible changes. Objective 4, tackle abuses of the right to free movement and enable us to control migration from the European Union in line with our manifesto. And so it went on. So back to the speech. What did he say? Well, he made the usual threat as if he would walk away. Let's not forget that Cameron is not anti-Europe at all. He's not Eurosceptic. He is extremely pro-European Union. So anytime he suggests that Britain will walk away from Europe, he's lying through his teeth. Well, what else did he have to say? He said there'll be no second referendum. So this is it, a one-shot deal. That's what we're getting. But I thought this was the most interesting aspect of this. He began his speech really by saying that Europe, the whole European Union project, is a means to an end. Now, of course, he didn't define what that end is, but he said it's a means to an end, and therefore, if we need to take a step back in order to sort of meet that end, well, that's something that he's prepared to do. And he said, the debate will quicken once I've completed the negotiation, and anyone engaged should speak up on this issue. Now, I wasn't clear what engaged meant in this case. Do you think it means employed? Engaged mean employed in this case?
It's difficult to know with Cameron because he's usually lying, Mike, so
yeah.
The meaning for each word that comes out of his mouth is pretty difficult to be sure of.
Well, I don't think he wants to hear from the general public. I think he only wants to hear from people that are actually employed by any of the organisations that may be on either side of the debate. Maybe we'll come on to that in a second. But what he said, as he said in his objectives here, any changes that are agreed must be legally binding, and his objective is to make those irreversible. Now, of course, our constitution says that our parliament can't bind its successors, but he clearly intends that it should be anything that he agrees here should be irreversible, and he's effectively, what he's saying is we will be bound to the European Union forever.
Yeah.
But the question is, what form will that European Union take? And of course, he's going to come to the table with his weasel words and his attempt to persuade us that he's renegotiated the relationship between Britain and Europe. But in the meantime, Europe itself will be much worse than it is already. Much tighter integration, more federalism, a European army, a European treasury, a European foreign office.
All of which is coming into place as we speak.
Yes.
So it's not as if it's a future development. This is all being slid in under the radar, as they say. So this is trilateral policy heading towards globalism, world government. And a little bit later, we've got a short article which has appeared in our local newspaper, the Plymouth Herald, which is intimating at a global system of law. So this fits together quite well at the moment, Mike.
Yes.
But Cameron, a liar, basically, to the nation. Treason, treachery are his trade.
Well, there is no question that this is a psychological operation, and it's pretty clear that they seem to have both sides of the argument pretty well sewn up at this point.
Yeah, as I think we are about to discover. Well, let's just have a look at this. This is the Telegraph. Several of the mainstream papers were crowing about this. Heckling for Britain, why I interrupted David Cameron at his EU speech. And on it goes. This referendum isn't about what it suits at the suits at the CBI think. It's about all of us taking back our democracy from unelected Brussels bureaucrats. Now, you would think that this is all sort of the Telegraph speaking, but actually it's not. What we've got going on here are some pretty young guys, I think 18 and 19, and they got into the CBI meeting dressed up as suits, so they were obviously businessmen, and then they stood up and heckled David Cameron. So we've got other newspapers saying, well, what a good job David Cameron did. The Mail here saying Cameron keeps it cool as protesters heckle during CBI speech. There's a video clip embedded in this article which we'd encourage people to go and watch, because David Cameron is unbelievably relaxed. Unbelievably relaxed. Now, why was he so relaxed? Well, he was relaxed because the whole thing was a pre-planned scam, which I'm going to say must have been known to the Tory party. Now, we get part of the clue from the Daily Mail itself, because this was part of the support article, and this is the bit we're interested in. It says, Phil Shepherd, that's one of the two students with the London School of Economics, even campaigned on the streets of Croydon to help elect one of the Prime Minister's whips, Gavin Barwell, in the general election. Now, here's the key bit. Their stunt was masterminded by anti-EU campaign group Vote Leave, who set up Leon and Shepherd Web Solutions Limited for £700 on October the 26th. And after being registered with Companies House, the students were able to buy £400 ahead tickets for today's, as it was, CBI event, with seats just a few feet away from Mr. Cameron. And apparently Vote Leave told the Mail that the £1,500 scam, that is the word, scam, was good value for money.
So just to understand that properly, they set up a false company in order to get tickets for the CBI event that Cameron would be speaking at.
Yeah. And why would Cameron be so relaxed? Because these two lads stood up with a banner basically complaining about the CBI. Cameron, unbelievably relaxed. Why would he be so relaxed? Well, let's have a look at what they're talking about with Vote Leave. What can we tell you? Well, here is a screenshot. You'll be able to see that in a bit more detail shortly. But what are they talking about? Why we should vote to leave. Technological, economic forces are changing the world. EU institutions cannot cope. We've lost control of vital policies. This is damaging. We need a new relationship. We negotiate a new UK-EU deal based on free trade and friendly cooperation. We end the supremacy of EU law. We regain control. We stop sending 350 million every week to Brussels. We regain our seats on international institutions. A vote to leave and a better, friendlier relationship with the EU is much safer than giving Brussels more power and more money every year. Now, we've got to say you need to go to the website to look at this yourself, because there's some very interesting dialogue. Now, what we discover, of course, is that Vote to Leave is totally in bed with Conservatives for Britain. What have they got to say? Well, Conservatives for Britain is a new campaign group to represent the large number of Conservatives who want to see fundamental change in Britain's relationship with the European Union. We consider the current terms of the relationship with the EU to be untenable. We support the party's policy of renegotiation referendum. We believe a credible prospect of exit is necessary to underwrite that renegotiation. What they're actually talking about here, Mike, is renegotiating with the threat of exit. This is nothing about getting out.
So who's the fraud on here? It's certainly not on the EU.
Well,
it's on the British people.
Absolutely on the British public. And what we are going to encourage people to do is to go to these sites, read the language yourself. Somebody said on screen it's a load of utter tosh, and I'm going to say back to the gentleman concerned, no, what you are watching is blatant manipulation of people's minds. They think they're voting to get out, and in fact it's dragging them into a mire. But it gets better. Let's get on a bit, and we've got another one here, another campaign. Let's have a look at this one, tied in here. And for Britain, do you agree with us? As business leaders and entrepreneurs responsible for millions of British jobs, we believe the government is right to seek a new deal for the EU, seek a new deal. For the UK's role in Europe, we believe that far from being a threat to our economic interests, a flexible, competitive Europe with more powers devolved from Brussels is essential for growth. We therefore urge all political parties to join in committing themselves to a national drive to renegotiate the terms of Britain's membership of the EU. So for Britain is also about renegotiation. And let's go to another one in case we've missed how this scam works. What's the title of this website? Can you read that at all, Mike?
Labour Leave.
Yeah, Labour Leave. It's clear that David Cameron cannot achieve the fundamental change this country needs. An incoming Labour government in 2020 will not be able to implement its programme for reform due to EU restrictions. This is because successive British governments have handed over power and influence to an unaccountable EU institutions, etc. Get into this further. This is talking about renegotiation. So what we've got is a group of scam organisations. I'm going to say they are using nudging. We'll be able to give you more on that in the coming days. They're using applied psychology to lead people to think they're voting to get out of the EU, but actually what this is doing is renegotiation. Now here's the Vote Leave website. I think there's some interesting psychology in this picture. I would guess these are starlings flocking together. And of course they're like a school of fish, many individual birds, but they all act together. Vote Leave is the campaign for a leave vote in the EU referendum. Now just have a look at that. We've got Vote Leave, to leave, but then it redefines leave between inverted commas. This is NLP, Mike, as far as I'm concerned. So somebody getting into this site has no clue what this is really about, but it is not about leaving.
Well, so Vote Leave is for a leave vote, but then when you look at the organisations that are behind it, it's for a renegotiation vote, actually.
It's renegotiation. So if you pick up on the style of these sites, this is the Labour one here. I've put, it's pumping the hearts of old Labour, old images, black and white photographs. They are absolutely trying to lure in the old Labour style voters. And then we've got messages, for example, from Tony Benn. He said, when I saw how the European Union was developing, it was very obvious what they had in mind was not democratic. In Britain, you vote for a government, so the government has to listen to you. And if you don't like it, you can change it. Well, I'm going to say if Tony Benn was warning about the EU, he didn't really stand on the platform shouting about it, and neither did old Labour. But that's where I reckon they're going to capture the old Labour vote, suck them into the scam. And here's Conservatives for Britain, quite telling Mike they need a website to show us which Conservatives are for Britain, because obviously the bulk of Conservatives are not for Britain at all. So how's this scam been put together? Well, perhaps we should meet this man, Matthew Elliott. Now, he was actually Chief Executive of Business for Britain. He's then hopped across to the new Vote Leave. So let's put him in there as well. chief executive there. What do they say about themselves? They say, well, we're pretty good because we're going to cap salaries at £99,000 a year so that you know your money's gone to the campaign, and don't worry about the poor people because the ratio between top and bottom is no more than a factor of about 4 to 5. So if you're only getting £20,000 a year in London, well, that's probably okay. But this gentleman is the one we believe is on 99,000, presumably. But my goodness, he gets around because he was also involved with the Taxpayers Alliance. And the Taxpayers Alliance in this little image is actually bemoaning the fact that 50,000 NHS staff earn more than £100,000. That's a remarkable coincidence, isn't it? And he also pops up here because he was helping to run the no to alternative voting.
Yes.
And lastly, he's also been involved with Big Brother Watch. Except it isn't last, because if we have a look at The Guardian talking about him, it says here that he won Conservative Home One to Watch Award in 2007. William Hague presented Elliott with the Conservative Way Forward's One of Us Award. So this man is absolutely not working to get Britain out of Europe. And then it goes on to say in the same year, Elliott was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. I always think that's the dark arts, Mike. He's on the Advisory Council of the European Foundation and the Young Britons Foundation. And he's also on the Advisory Committee of the New Culture Forum. So he's pretty busy down there. We just bring a couple of them on screen. Here's the Young Britain Foundation. And this is the European Foundation, which is actually linked in with MP Bill Cash. But the Young Britons Foundation led us somewhere even more interesting. Have a look at this, because their executive director is a man of the law, Matthew Richardson, barrister, graduate of Oxford, and he just happens to be party secretary of UKIP.
How does that work?
Well, they seem to be in bed together, I think is the correct way of looking at this. So we have a PSYOP scam, which is to lead people to think that they're going to vote to leave the European Union. Actually, the whole organisation is designed to take your mind to renegotiation, and they're going flat out to draw in the body the Conservatives, UKIP. UKIP struggling, I think, at the moment with financial issues. That's what I've heard. And we've got the old Labour brigade, who of course could be very dangerous to the EU. They're being pulled in as well. This is a scam. It's an EU referendum PSYOP. It needs to be exposed. We can do it with your help if we can circulate enough of the evidence to show what's going on.
Right, so moving on then. Last night, the Crane report, Ian Crane was joined by Max Egan. Now, straight after this programme, we're going to be showing that episode of the Crane Report for anybody that didn't see it last night. But in the meantime, here's a short clip.
Draw support from your politicians. I recommend everybody withdraw all support. Stop paying any taxes any way you can. Stop voting. Tell these people you won't vote for anybody until they can show you why they are supporting war crimes. And don't take an argument from them that we're not war criminals. Well, do you support Israel? Fine, you're a war criminal, because here's a copy of the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 33, which says collective punishment is a war crime, and I give you Gaza Strip. You support Israel, you support Gaza Strip, you support what they're doing in West Bank, the illegal settlements. This is all breaches of the Fourth Geneva Convention. So, you know, if any of their legislation is going to mean anything, well, this needs to be looked at. And we have the moral and legal duty to do this ourselves and to call this out, because if we don't, and we choose to be politically correct over this, and we choose to go down the pathways that they give us, then we're just allowing a prison to be built around us, and we deserve what we get.
So the message from Max there very clear. So let me remind everybody watching today that Chris Coverdale is in prison at the moment for doing exactly what Max is demanding of us all, withholding tax, so long as we have war criminals in charge. So at the very least, I believe that Chris deserves a letter from everyone watching, thanking him for taking a stand. So if you'd like to write, here are the details. I think you should.
It's a big boost.
Yes.
would be a big boost to him. So if you've got some spare capacity, please do write. Well, we've got another advert really here, but this is to do with this subject of lie detectors. And Sky News reporting that Paula Radcliffe has been saying that basically as a result of those nasty Russians and doping, that she thinks that athletes should be given lie detector tests, leaving aside the political smear on the Russians. The significance of the lie detector tests is that, of course, Bill Maloney from Pie and Mash Films has been calling for some considerable time to introduce lie detector tests to sort out or help sort out the business of witnesses' testimonies in the field of child abuse, and of course, where we have accused pleading their innocence, they should have the opportunity of taking a lie detector test. Now, we understand that the British organisation which provides lie detector tests has offered Bill Maloney £100,000 of free testing, and this is an opportunity to really bring some pressure to bear on the whole subject of child abuse, reliability of witnesses, and of course those who plead their innocence, nothing to hide, presumably a lie detector test would not be a problem. Well, on the subject of immigration, the local paper, the Plymouth Herald, has been reporting that the Master of the Rolls has been busy talking at the local university, delivering this year's Pilgrim Fathers lecture. This was organised with the Plymouth Law Society, and interestingly enough, the subject of the lecture was the globalisation of law. And Lord Dyson centred on two particular aspects: refugee cases and the influence of overseas judgments on British courts. Now, aside from the globalisation of law, which seems to us to be an extremely dangerous idea, what he was doing was warning that turbulence in Syria and other overseas countries was leading to more refugees coming to UK and, of course, bigger problems. This was timely because tonight I will be down at the Lugger Hotel in Penzance, Cornwall, delivering a talk on immigration and the multicultural agenda. It's the first time that we've covered a topic like this. We think the time is right. It'll be very interesting to see who is there, how many turn up. But I was asked to cover this topic as apparently immigration and the multicultural agenda is now starting to come up in the communities in Cornwall. So that's going to be quite interesting, Mike, and also interesting to see whether we get some hecklers. Who knows who might have arranged those, but we'll see.
Indeed.
I'll report back in due course.
Right, now, last Thursday, I think it was, I brought this slide up with a bunch of others from the National Archives, highlighting that records in many cases with regard to children's homes were closed for 75 years. Now, one or two people, and I have to say, I'm sorry it wasn't a few more, but one or two people did point out to me that when they checked my comments, they discovered that, oh look, Beechwood Residential, this is the same file, it is the same file, was in fact open and had been closed until 2014 and was opened on 14th of October 2014. So what happened here then? Well, basically what happened was that the slides that I showed had originally been produced for the UK Column News, which was broadcast on the 2nd of September 2014, 1 month before Beechwood this file was opened in the National Archives. And I thought that was very intriguing, that 1 month after we broadcast this, the files were opened. So I asked the National Archives to comment on this, and this is their response. Dear Mike, thank you for your query. I've checked the details with our Freedom of Information team and can confirm the following details in relation to file BN62/1236. That's the Beechwood one. File BN62/1236 was originally closed for 75 years in July 28th, 1988 because it contains sensitive personal information where release would distress or endanger an individual who was a minor at the date of file. The original record opening date was set for 1st January 2045. They went on to say, here we go. Following a request in October 2014, the file was reviewed under Freedom of Information legislation, and the decision was taken to open the file with closed extracts to protect the sensitive personal data of individual people resident in the home. The extracts include reasons for being in the home, medical details, references to behavioural issues, and personal information of staff members. As a result, these extracts are closed to 2067, with when the youngest individual can be considered over 100 years of age, in line with the legislation. Kind regards, Rebecca. So thank you, Rebecca, for that. It was very helpful. But what's interesting to me is that this Beechwood file was originally closed until 2045. It's now been opened with some of the information extracted and put into a separate closed file, which is now closed until 2067. So that information is closed for even longer than it was before. Now, you would say that the extracts which are closed, the reasons for them being closed that are listed there, most of those are pretty reasonable. But nonetheless, we have no way of knowing if there's anything in those files which is of relevance to the Goddard inquiry, and I wonder, will the Goddard inquiry get access to these closed files? I suspect not. So I thought we would have a look at some of these. This is just one page. If you search for BN62 on the National Archives website, which is the main category for these files, and I just thought we would scroll down through this one page out of the search results, and you can see closed extracts, closed extracts, closed extracts, pages and pages and pages of closed extracts out of these files, because all these files have been opened apparently with relevant information removed. And this continues to scroll on down. 13 pages, 3 pages, 33 pages, 14 pages of closed extracts, all from different files relating to children's homes. And as we get towards the bottom, you will see that this is only one page out of a whole series of pages with similar information closed. So what is going on here?
Well, somebody said, well, of course, by 2067, all the perpetrators will be dead. So that's one possibility. Maybe 2067 is actually the date at which Justice Goddard will publish her results of her inquiry.
Well, perhaps Chilcot gives us a clue there.
In line with Chilcot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So massive cover-up by the state. We've got the EU referendum vote scam, psychological operations. We've got a massive cover-up of child abuse issues. Why? David Cameron, of course, has told us why, because the exposure of child abuse amongst political circles, the establishment, VIPs in UK, in his words, was a risk to national security. Child abuse in UK capable of bringing down the British government, and therefore you close all the files to 2067.
I would suggest that if anybody thinks they're involved or have been included in any of those files that now have closed extracts, a subject access request may be what's necessary for you to find out your own personal information that may be included in those. Yeah. Well, that might be the way to go. But I'd like to hear from the Goddard inquiry whether they are going to get access to that closed information, because it must be relevant where a children's home has been implicated in child sexual abuse.
Well, the only trouble with Goddard getting hold of them, Mike, is they may then all be lost, because that seems to be a regular occurrence.
Yes,
sorry
indeed.
To be cynical.
Okay. Philip Hammond is in the United States today, and he met with John Kerry. And he was talking about Britain's alliance with the United States. He said it is our most important relationship, and it is at the heart of everything we do. He said the challenges we face in Syria, the challenges we face in Iraq, the broader problems in the Middle East, dealing with Russian aggression wherever we see it, we will always stand together. So there you go. There they are standing together. And of course, as you saw on the previous slide, they're still talking about the high probability of the Russian airliner being downed by a bomb. And as we have commented and others have commented, we wonder how Philip Hammond knows that. Now, of course, Russia admits that an act of international terrorism may be responsible for the downing of the aircraft, but they're still investigating that, and other possibilities are absolutely still being considered. Of course, when Russia uses the term international terrorism, they mean Britain and the United States. So Russia also, by the way, unbelievably and quite naturally so unbelievably angry that Britain, which claims to have intelligence information supporting its claims that there was a bomb involved, won't share that intelligence with Russia. So actually, I believe this situation is pretty dangerous. If there's any evidence turns up at all that Britain, the USA, or any group or individual which can be linked back to Britain or the USA was involved in the downing of that aircraft, Russia can really only see that as an act of war.
Well, must be, or should be. In fact, it's probably the right way of looking at it. But interesting there, with the possibility that the airliner possibility. So Cameron stood on the world stage and more or less said, "Yep, it was a bomb." Due to chatter, that was chatter came out of American sources. Then it was GCHQ. Now we're back to possibility.
It's just a possibility, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, what we did was ruin thousands of people's holidays and
Well,
left them stranded.
Close those air routes.
Yes. So yesterday we talked about Cameron's puppet masters, and one of those puppet masters is this lady, Carolyn McCall, and she is calling now because of what's happened in Sharm, is calling for much tighter security at airports globally. So this is obviously unsurprising because, I mean, we know that Russian jet was brought down by a bomb. So she's calling for increased security. And she has said, we had about 4,500 passengers in Sharm last Wednesday. That's last week when this all began. And she's saying that by the end of yesterday, they've brought back 1,500 of them. So she apologised to passengers apparently for the frustrations of this, but she says that everybody will be back by this coming weekend. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Russia was able to get 11,000 people out of the country in a couple of days?
Well, it's because the Russians are using common sense most of the time, whereas we're dealing now in fantasy bunker mentality.
Well, she says that it's absolutely caused by the Egyptian authorities. So I'm not clear why the Egyptian authorities would be more willing to cooperate with Russia than Britain under these circumstances, unless they feel that they've been hard done by in some way.
Absolutely. I can't imagine any country in the world wanting to trust the British government at the moment, especially countries in the Middle East.
Yes. Okay, well, look, to end for today, I just wanted to highlight this because exporting goods is one of the key objectives of the government, and they're running these roadshows at the moment. And I just really enjoyed this image of Francis Maude standing in front of a sign saying exporting is great. And I just want to put on the record, export yourself, Francis, because we're not interested in your kind of government anymore.
Well, this is true, Mike. I think it was Hammond that was calling for, he's still calling for some form of increase in airstrikes on Syria. I think that's what I read the other day. Why don't we drop some of these politicians? That would solve the problem. We could export our own politicians.
It is
a form of export.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you have it. David Cameron's Conservative government lying to the nation as usual, working on a world stage for the next war, working to rid sovereign nations of their elected leaders. Matters not to David Cameron. With the other hand, he's going to lie to the British public, deceive the British public, and UK Column is going to state he is already using applied behavioural psychology in order to deceive people in that leave the EU through the referendum. We'll be giving more details on that, but a clue to it is the fact that we now know that the active use of NLP is progressing at speed within the Conservative Party. So never mind the government and the Behavioural Insights team through the Cabinet Office, we are now certain that raw NLP is being used on Conservative MPs. So if they weren't thinking properly in the beginning, Mike, they certainly aren't now.
Indeed. Remember, #EU referendum PSYOP.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. If you like what we do, if you'd like to see us expand our studio so that we can at least stretch and bring in team panel discussions, please consider subscribing or making a donation. We can only do what we do with your support. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.